Well, hello there. It's been a minute, but we've managed to pull two of the three Musketeers together for a little old chinwag. Since we last caught up, Manchester United have won a cup. Casemiro's been sent off twice. Liverpool are 8th, Chelsea are 11th. Graham Potter's been sacked, and somehow Frank Lampard is Chelsea manager again. I could go on and on and on, but we've got a show to do, and Dale is getting restless. You're, of course, very welcome to the latest instalment of the Streddycast. Dale, my man, it has been a while. How are you getting on? How's things? How's life?
Brilliant. I want to start by saying I never get restless listening to your voice. But no, things have been good. Since we last spoke, I know you mentioned the cup we won. That was the League Cup final, which I was at, and it was an amazing day out, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, we've had some lows too, since then. We've had some heavy defeats. We've had some kind of slipping up a little bit in that race for top four, but you look at the teams around us, and they're showing absolutely no consistency. So, I'm still fairly optimistic about getting that top fourth place.
Oh yeah, as am I. And I suppose, look, it's probably nearly 3 months since we've sat down and actually had a proper conversation here. There's been so much has happened, and there's any number of topics that we could start speaking about. But realistically, I suppose we have to look at a takeover. It's the biggest news that's there, and it's the news that's not going away. But for news that's not going away, there's not a whole pile happening, is there?
Yeah, I think when this announcement was made a few months ago about the Glazers willing to listen to offers, there was a kind of a sense of, I suppose, cautious optimism. People are cautiously optimistic about this because we've been waiting so long for the Glazers to get out of town. 17 years of protests, and they haven't changed their ways. I think they've got to a point now where their business model, has kind of reached a dead end where they don't know where to move, and they're looking for investment and maybe the best offer. But now it's hard to be kind of optimistic at all. It's just taken so long. There's so much whispering that they could remain, they could welcome on investors, and I think that's the worst case scenario for Manchester United. I really do. Then again, Shaun, I don't know how you feel about this. I want to ask you about the bidders, because looking on social media, people are very, very keen to take sides here. They're either in the camp of Qatar, they're in the camp of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, or I think in smaller cases, there's a guy from Finland that's bigging up a bit of a publicity.
He's got one or two funny ideas, doesn't he?
Yeah, but on a serious note, what have you made of kind of what you've seen on social media from fans, people that read, people that listen to this podcast, that may be taking, I guess, premature sides in this argument?
I think it really typifies the nature of the beast that is the Manchester United fan base on social media. I know there's a lot of fickle opinions with regards to everything, particularly on Twitter. But when it comes to Manchester United on Twitter, on social media, there's always a divide. People will argue about the colour of the sky if they can in relation to Manchester United. So when you pit two completely opposite spectrums of the financial world, two mega rich individuals, one representing, I suppose, a whole host of humanitarian issues and a whole host of topics that Western society are not willing to comprehend and don't want to comprehend. And then on the other aspect, you're looking at Sir Jim, who by all accounts is a lifelong Red, but obviously, as we've discussed on this podcast many times, was quite keen on buying Chelsea as well. But he's a guy who's coming in, very successful businessman, and he's going to have a board of very successful business minds alongside him. Now, in terms of how people have vindicated their opinion on social media, far be it from me to tell them that they're wrong. I think as football fans, we often get very convoluted with regards to our ideals about how a football team should be run, about what should happen on a pitch, what should happen in a boardroom. And ultimately, Manchester United fans have been scarred for all of the torment that we've been put through with our current ownership. And it's very, very hard to build up that trust. So then when you're looking at people coming from the outside in, naturally your back is up against the wall. And you're going to start trying to find flaw in whoever comes in to buy the club. Something you and I have spoken about many, many times before. We seem to get this idea that we can control who's actually going to buy the football club. When realistically speaking, the money that is going, if this actually comes to fruition, the money that has to swap hands to make it happen, you're talking colossal money with a very, very small percentage of people that can actually get in that equation. In terms of how people have separated on social media, it went from Sir Jim being the knight in shining armor to a
Yeah.
couple of weeks, an endless amount of polls just damning him. And it was a very, very small percentage of people, by and large, on Twitter. I know now you can look at stuff like with Andy Mitten and you can see that the vast majority of the percentage of people in a poll that he ran at that time was looking for Sir Jim to come in. But it really, really shows the fickle nature of our fan base and just how fractured it is. But also, I think it really, really identifies the amount of people that support the football club on the opposite side of the planet. You know, people who've got differing opinions to you and I. And ultimately, I think whoever comes in, if God willing it does happen, someone is going to be unhappy.
Yeah, no, you can't please everyone. I think we all know that. It's just interesting because with some of the backlash that could happen from, say, a Qatari takeover and how that could upset so many people. You know, we've seen when the Glazers took over, there was a section of Manchester United fans that kind of broke off, stopped going, formed a different club in FC United Manchester, and went their separate ways. They were fed up with modern football, and like I respect their decision to do that. But I'm just wondering, you know, if a backlash of that could happen this time around. With Qatar, the human rights issue, and what could lead. You know, it would be sad to see more fans break away. But you mentioned how split the fan base is right now. And you just wonder what would happen if a takeover did happen. But that's all it is right now, isn't it, Shaun? You know, you get these reports every few weeks. All we're doing is wondering, what if the Glazers stay? Because then that carries on then to what we can achieve or what we can do in the summer. Erik ten Hag is in the process now of assessing his squad, deciding which players he wants to carry into his second season. And he doesn't know who's going to own the club or how much money he's going to have available to improve that squad. You know, we all have great ideas about what Manchester United should be doing this summer. Centre forwards, midfielders, goalkeepers, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, a lot banks on whether this takeover happens between now and the end of the season.
It does, absolutely. And this is, I suppose, where a lot of the frustration is coming in, because you have a lot of fans and we'll say the real hardcore that we're looking at maybe something happening this quicker, you know. So like, because we just seem to be sitting around and waiting. And as you're touching upon with owners coming in summer, a lot of people would like to have some sort of a notion as to what's occurring. So as Erik ten Hag could maybe have this transfer kitty that people are looking at an ideal summer, a proper rebuild, that he can just go all gunning for what it is he's looking for next season. It's funny when we're speaking that you see that shortly after 7:00 this evening that the 1958 have announced their next protest. They're going to be protesting at home to Villa on April 30th and saying that they held back for a reason. Now you know why. They called us back in November. Plans and details to follow. You are either with the fans or with the Glazers. For you, for us, for each other. So it just goes to show.
I've seen a few reactions to this, and just a small few people kind of taking the piss out of these protests and kind of suggesting that they're marches, just marches. But that's all a protest needs to be. And I've said this in the podcast before about some of the work that's going on behind the scenes with the 1958 and ensuring these protests take place. We need to keep making noise. You know, in this process of bidders coming in, people showing interest, we need everyone in the world to see the fans are unhappy. You know, at the weekend, the game against Everton at Old Trafford, BT Sport got a fantastic shot as the players were coming out of the tunnel. And they really focused on the tunnel with the Glazers out banner. I thought it was amazing because I've seen other weeks with Sky Sports, actually at the weekend with Match of the Day, they don't focus on it. It's actually a quick little zoom and they're out. BT Sport really, really focused on it. And I think it's so important that with these protests, right, the 1958 aren't going to get rid of the Glazers. They're not going to force them to sell, but I think it's important that the whole world sees how pissed off and fed up United fans are. You know, what people that are kind of taking the piss out of this, what do they have to suggest? What's the alternative? What's their idea?
Well, that's it. And it's something that's very admirable as well. You know, when you're looking at the football, you know, you were at the cup final, when you're either in stadium or you're watching it, there's a massive representation of people going out of their way, that even at a point, if we get a second or a third goal, that, this is it now, we have 3 points today, then everybody stands up and starts screaming that they want the Glazers out. It's emphasizing this point, and more the commentators are picking up on it as well. If you're watching it on the television, they can see that, this is going good. United are just about to lift the cup, but they're still screaming that they want the Glazers out, and this is the way it should be.
It's quite amazing. You pick up on it there. Some of the commentators, they're even picking up on the chance. And it happened again at Everton. After all the goals went in, straight away, Glazers out chance. It's funny because these commentators that are commentating the game are picking up on it. There's something in the water at TalkSport, because those fuckers are convinced that we never sing about it. We only sing about it when we're losing. It happens every week this season. The 1958 done it every week this season. Protests, every home game protests. Now, these protests, people are joking, they're not changing that. What do you want them to do? They're just making noise, and that's exactly what they need to do, and make sure the message is being sent to everyone that we're not happy.
But again, this is drawn back in what we were saying about the potential owners. I mean, you got the 1958 trying to do something, okay? And immediately social media jumps on this argument as to, is it actually benefiting, or is it just a glorified march and selling merch? So it's just a continuation of this fractured fan base that is never going to be happy. We're never going to have a fan base that's 100% happy. But what the guys are doing is they're going out, they're making noise, they're making attention, they're making pictures, these aerial shots of mass marches with those banners, with flares. That's what we need, because otherwise, what else do we have there? There's nothing else. We can sit down, you can type angry messages, you can send angry tweets out there, but that's not really doing anything. And people will argue that this isn't going to do anything either. It's better than nothing. And you have to credit them for going out there and actually trying and putting themselves forward for this.
Listen to the two things we're talking about here. United fans, or some United fans, complaining about these protests not being enough. And then we have a section of the media, TalkSport, that suggests that we don't even talk, we don't sing about the Glazers only when we're losing. So you can't keep anybody happy. There's no middle ground. We do one thing, people are complaining about it. We're not doing enough. It's a merry-go-round, and I suppose that's just social media for you. It's a cockpit of shit. It's constant nagging and people arguing and people, I don't know, all over the place. But look, that's what this takeover is going to probably bring for the coming weeks. It's dragging on now. These takeovers are going to take time. But I know what I mentioned, having this done before the transfer window would help Erik ten Hag. But I think the bigger picture for me, though, Shaun, is that however long it takes, I hope this is the end.
Oh, yeah. It just needs to be done and dusted with now. And look, I'm trying to be as pragmatic about it all as I possibly can. And so much is accelerated. And I know they'll always have the caveat to fall back on. Well, we never actually said we were selling. We said we were looking at alternative and the different financial possibilities. Can you imagine the backlash the Glazers would face if they didn't sell the club now? It's dangling that carrot in front of that proverbial carrot. It's dangling it there. It's teasing that, yeah, we're going. We just need the right amount. If they turned around and they said, you know what, we're not going to bother. I mean, I hate to think of what damage would be done around the area.
I'm not going to suggest what I think will happen, because that could get me into trouble. But all I'm going to say is a repeat, or maybe what happened against Liverpool when the game was suspended tenfold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And you could even see it from the last hour and a half from the confirmation of the next protest. You've already got people saying the only thing that's going to work here is getting the game stopped. So you have that little contingent and it's not such a little contingent. It might seem like a small contingent. There's a big enough contingent there that want that to happen. So it's better that they better start getting their wheels in motion and just start realizing that the time is up now. It's time to get over and done with, and allow Manchester United to start focusing on football for once, And
that's it. We just started a podcast and we're talking about these fucking leeches. Nothing about football yet.
I know. Well, let's do that then. Let's forget about the leeches. Let's focus on the football. Let's look at the side, because it's something I was actually speaking about today with a good buddy of mine. I hadn't spoke to him in probably about 3-4 weeks. He's obviously had a couple in him when he was speaking to me and making mention, how are United doing? It's a little bit hate, it's a little bit miss. Keep falling back on the same thing. if we could go back 6-7 months and I could speak to myself from 6 or 7 months ago, and I could say, look, I'm going to give you the 11th of April. You've got the League Cup in the bag. You've got an FA Cup semi-final, a quarter-final in Europe, and you're level on points with third place in the league. I'd have taken both of your hands off and I'd have asked for change. It's absolutely fantastic. And when you're looking at it over the last 3 games, we had a bit of disappointment in Newcastle back at the start of April. But since then, 2 clean sheets, 2 victories over Brentford, who are on a high. Had only lost once in 16 games, and Everton, who are gunning for every single point they can. We've oversaw that difficult 3-game period without Casemiro, but as well as welcoming him back, we've also welcomed back Christian Eriksen. Now, I know there's uncertainty about Marcus Rashford at the moment, but we have a situation where we're welcoming back arguably 2 of our most pivotal members of the centre of the field that can control these games. We got Sevilla coming up on Thursday. It's good vibes there.
Yeah, no, having those 2 back, Eriksen and Casemiro, I actually thought when Eriksen got that injury in January, and we got over that hump of the kind of fixture congestion around the League Cup final, I thought our performance levels dipped a little bit. And people were kind of suggesting that could have been down to fatigue and all these games being up on top of each other. But it was it's no wonder now. You look at the difference that Eriksen made at the start of the season, and then his injury had, and then we were playing games with Fred and McTominay midfield again. I know they've had some good games, but let's call a spade a spade. The big difference with Eriksen and his class is when he receives a ball, he's able to do it on a half turn, put his head up and find one of the players out wide and get that ball forward, a bit of creativity. It's not something that Fred and McTominay possess, and we really missed it. Then when Casemiro was out with the suspension, we just do not have an alternative option to Casemiro in the squad. We have nobody that can come in and do the job half as good as he can do it. And it's huge. And I think although Rashford's going to be out for a few weeks, hopefully it's not too long, I think having those 2 in midfield, Shaun, we'll score goals. Those 2 can open up defense with passes in ways that other midfielders cannot do. And I think there'll be an absolute big bonus to us at this part of the season. Now, the big thing with us is Casemiro plays against Seville on Thursday night. He's walking a suspension tightrope already. A yellow card and he's out the next game.
Am I correct in saying Bruno is the same?
Bruno is the same, yeah. So, Casemiro, he's missed 8 games this season, 8 or 9 games through suspension. The most he's missed in any season through suspension. So that's something that I think maybe needs to be addressed. But also you look at the suspension he's had and I think the arguments that we could put forward, that some of them were quite harsh, especially when you see what's happened in the Premier League in recent weeks and the disasters that have occurred with VAR and the inconsistencies. Casemiro might have an argument to say that he's been dealt with harshly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is the issue that people have. By and large, when you look at VAR supplies issues. VAR isn't the issue. VAR is supplying issues as a result of some of the individuals that are sitting down and making those decisions, especially when they have to turn around the morning after a game and apologize for decisions that are made the previous day. The largest thing is inconsistencies. It is inconsistency in decision. And that is what is causing the most frustration, because you're seeing Casemiro see a red card, get a 3-match suspension. Just go back to the Everton game and you look at Jimmy Garner. He didn't go in with intent on Aaron Wan-Bissaka, but he kept a leg in there, and he could have hurt Aaron very, very much so with a follow through. A lot of pressure down his leg with his studs, and extremely reminiscent. You could actually even argue that it was a little bit more physical than what Casemiro did, yet it doesn't even receive a yellow card. And that's where the inconsistencies occur. And that's where the frustration comes, because particularly when it's Casemiro, because as you said, I'm drawn back an awful long time to try to remember somebody who had such a pivotal influence on this side. Like when he is absent, it's not only do you lack his quality on the field and the talent that he obviously possesses. I almost feel that the other players are nervous. You know, when you get that sort of nervous factor about a footballer on the field, you talk about it all the time with goalkeepers and defenders and that relationship that they have. Defenders can be nervous because of a goalkeeper behind them. A goalkeeper can be nervous because of the centre-back pairing that's in front of him. I think Casemiro oozes this sense of control throughout the entire team. And when he's missing, it's almost like not only it reverberates from the players into the stands and into the fans. It's his presence is absolutely immense. But also, as we touched upon with Christian Eriksen, I also think he can have a calming influence as well, because the level of control that he can have over a game is absolutely tremendous. And one of the things that's fantastic, and it's something that we haven't been able to say in all the time that you and I have been talking, we now have a situation where we have a full fit midfield to select from. And you're talking about more than likely Casemiro, Eriksen, Bruno lining down a midfield three. You've got someone like Sabitzer on the bench to be able to come on the bench as an option. Now that is real quality. It's real quality option football that sets you up really, really well for this run-in for this top four. We know how tight it is. We know how difficult it is with Spurs and Newcastle, and every single mistake is being punished. Even their mistakes are being punished by us. But we're going now into a run-in where Newcastle have got a pivotal 3 weeks. All right. Newcastle's next game is away to Aston Villa, who are absolutely flying under Unai Emery. I mean, they have come on so well. Really, really shines the light just on how poor Steven Gerrard was as Aston Villa manager. But Unai Emery has led Villa. He's, what are they now, 6th place? So Newcastle are away to Aston Villa. And then the following Sunday, they welcome Spurs. And then the week after that, they're away to Everton. So they have this pivotal 3-week period whereby it's really going to be put to them. Their squad is going to be put to the test. And on the opposite side of that, we're coming up against Nottingham Forest next. And we have all these players coming back, fighting fit. Yes, we have the European competition, the FA Cup competition. But I genuinely feel we're welcoming other players, including Anthony Martial, back at the exact right time to be able to have a solid run at this.
You'd wonder, looking at the teams around us, how many more wins it'd take to secure that top 4 place.
You would be a very brave man to even try to lay €5 on that, because there's so much football left to be played. Spurs have got 8 games. Newcastle and United have both got 9 games. As I said, in 2 weeks' time, Newcastle play Spurs. We still have to play Spurs. There's so much football to be played. And there's an awful lot of twists and turns in this yet. I think all 3 teams could drop points. I mean, what are United sitting at currently? We're at 56 points, as are Newcastle. 9 games left, talking 33 points to be collected. I mean, could you be confident in saying you could collect 25 or 26 points out of that?
Forest, you'd fancy us to be Forest at the moment. Then we run into a tough run of league fixtures, considering what's around us, because we're away to Spurs, then we're at home to Villa, and you mentioned as they've climbed up the table now and are kind of part of that conversation. Then we're away to Brighton. Brighton are a good side.
Yeah, I think the one thing that really stands out in the run-in for us is our last 4 games. We play West Ham, Wolves, Bournemouth and Fulham. So in the context of what you could look at for a favourable run-in in the Premier League, there are 4 teams that you take at the start of the season if you were looking for a run-in. It's
absolutely. Not that we've actually forgotten to. There's Chelsea thrown into the mix because that game hasn't been given a confirmed date yet as well. So
That's right. And I read something yesterday to state that the only free game week for that will be the last game week.
Yeah, I think they have to change now. It could be the 2nd of May now.
Could be the 2nd of May.
Which, if that's true, it can't be the 2nd of May. That's 2 days before we play Brighton. That wouldn't make sense. But look, it's the Premier League. You just don't know.
Our Premier League anything can happen. But,
yeah.
But what we're looking at as well, the top 4, obviously
massive.
And as I said, you'd be a brave man to get sent. And I will be confident that we'll get the top 4.
Look, the teams around us, Shaun, you're looking at Spurs, just sacked their manager. From one week to another, they're just so inconsistent. So inconsistent. You look at, are Liverpool part of the conversation now? Don't think so. Newcastle, right? I know they're going through a decent run of games right now, maybe since the League Cup final defeat. But this season, they've drawn far too many games. And you mentioned, look at their next 3 games coming up. There's points there they're probably going to drop. And teams around us are dropping points. There's no one in this top 4 race that I think has been consistent.
No. Outside of the top 2, and obviously you're fitting into that then as well, that when Newcastle face Spurs, the following week they play Everton. They have 1 week in between where they play Southampton, but then they welcome Arsenal. So there's big games to be played. There's lots of football to be played. I suppose the one thing that you'd look at with Spurs and Newcastle is the fact that their sole focus is on the league. obviously where we have the 2 cups, but we have the squad, we have the players to be able to facilitate that. And I'm still confident United get a top 4 finish. But coming up, I want to just touch on one thing here. We got Sevilla coming up on Thursday. Huge game, obviously, for the rest of the season and for the credence of the European pedigree that we have. Will be Erik ten Hag's 50th game in charge. Feels like last week he arrived. 50 games in charge already. And from those 49 games that he's played, he's amassed 71.4% win ratio. And what's even more funny, Dale, is 2 weeks ago, people were calling for his head.
Yeah, you're gonna get that after a bad result with your manager at Manchester United, unfortunately. But look, the thing with Erik ten Hag is I've been so impressed this season, and I'm not going to say I'm surprised because there was just glorifying reviews about him when he left Ajax, and anyone that's seen Ajax the Champions League under him could see they were a seriously well drilled outfit, and they were winning all around them in Holland too. So look, the pedigree was there. But what I will say is there's going to be more wobbles along the way. There's definitely going to be more wobbles along the way. But this man just oozes confidence, oozes the right kind of, in his words, I guess, vibes. He brings the right vibes to the table. And I love what I've seen this season. Shaun, you touched on how if you mentioned we could be in the top 4 race with a League Cup and still in FA Cup and Europa League 6 months ago, you take your hands off. Honestly, if you said to me at the end of last season, we're going to appoint a manager and I was going to be this happy with what I've seen, I would not believe it was possible. You know, this team last year, I mentioned so many times, we fell out of love with it. Throwing the towel in. We've seen the way Ollie was sacked and how Ragnick came in, and kind of a pure car crash. Players had given up. But this man has lifted that dressing room, a task that many of us thought was impossible because we all bought into what Ragnick said when he said the 10 players need to be sold this summer. You know, we all said that a lot of us agreed, saying, yeah, this dressing room is destroyed. He's got rid of a few players, but he's proven a lot of fucking people wrong. A lot of people wrong with some players. And I know Dallow's not going through the best part of the season right now, but his form in the first half of the season, absolutely class. Wan-Bissaka coming out of his shell after Christmas, absolutely class. Now, these aren't things that people jump to because they're going to jump to how impressive his new signings have been. But I'm looking at the small things he's done. You know, Dallo at the start of the season, people didn't even want a new right back next season if he kept that up. You know, which is a massive testament. So look, I think there's going to be more kind of wobbles along the way. We'll have a few heartbreaks, but look, Ten Hag is the right man, and we're on the right track.
Oh, certainly, and I think an easy way of putting it, we're probably about 12 months ahead of where we should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Because next season, Shaun, what our aim is to win the league.
100%. Well, I suppose next season, based on what we're seeing now, you'd at least want the side to be going in and being competitive for the league.
Yes,
to be thereabouts. You'd want them to be competitive and coming into this sort of situation. I know we've had a bit of an anomaly with fixtures over what's happened with the international around Christmas, but when you're in around April, if we're still in the conversation come April next year, then that's all anybody wants, and to be in that question. But we're looking now at a situation where obviously we've discussed, that you would have taken your hand off, and I think an old adage that came every single year for the last 3 or 4 years. We'll take a cup in top 4. We'll take a cup in top 4. We'll take it. That's all fans seem to be looking at. And then you sort of get the general rationale behind it is, oh, look how far you've fallen. But a cup in top 4 is all we were looking for every single season. And now we're looking at the potential of 3 cups and a top 4 finish to go along with it. And all the while, we've not even had a number 9. So this boils back to what we said. Pardon?
To truly kind of sum up what he's done, it's the feeling around the ground. It's feeling at Old Trafford on match day. I got the feeling last season. It was the 5-0 against Liverpool I'm talking about. But before the game, we had nothing to really to play for. Season was still fairly early on. We're coming up to Christmas and it felt like the season was nearly over. We had nothing. We were going nowhere. And you mentioned about being in the conversation. Like this, Old Trafford has come on a million times this last season, the mood around the place, and it's all he's all to thank.
He is, and you look at it. We're the 11th of April filming this, It was the 5th of March that we went to Anfield. Now, numerous Manchester United teams since Alex Ferguson has walked away, if they had endured what had happened in Anfield a little over a month ago, those players would be done mentally. They'd be finished. There'd be no bringing them back up. It didn't matter whether there would have been 5, 10, 15, 20 games of that season left. Those players would be gone. Their heads would be finished. You'd have a desolate looking manager sitting in the dugout. Instead, we turned out the very, very next day and put 4 past Real Betis. You've got a manager still standing there looking confident. You've the players still playing for him. So even despite the odd little setback that's happening, the players back him. The players clearly believe what it's not that they're buying in. They've already bought into what it is he's selling. And they understand that this guy clearly knows what he's talking about. The feel-good factor is back in Old Trafford. The feel-good factor is on the dugout. You can see it even with Steve McLaren. McLaren just looks so happy. Every time that they zoom in on him, he just looks like he's just so, so happy, and that he's really, really appreciative that he's sitting alongside a guy who clearly, he has the world here. He has it. And I know we're starting to get one or two little unsavory comments about Ten Hag and how he's roughing up people the wrong way. But this is a guy that he lives and breathes.
Who, Ronaldo?
The most recent one that I saw was the manager of Palmeiras over in Brazil.
Yes, shut up.
Yeah, he told Ten Hag to shut up over Rashford. But no, this is a guy. He's come in, and honestly, God, it's like he's after waving a magic wand. It really is, because to take the side and not even have a full year, and to achieve even what he has achieved thus far, we couldn't have dreamed it, Dale. Go back 12 months. We couldn't dream this.
To give a bit of balance, look, it's clear to see anyone listening to this podcast, if they're not on the same boat as us, that we are massive admirers of Ten Hag. But there's a few things that need to be worked on, and it's his first season. Like, for instance, what we've seen this year is 2 or 3 long winning runs. But when those winning runs came to an end, they really collapsed. We talked about that game against Liverpool. The game, I think it was one of the games that the winning run ended was against City as well. And they were bad defeats, really bad defeats. So what this team needs to learn to do, I know it's kind of a strange request, but when they lose and when things go wrong, it can't go that wrong.
Yeah,
it can't be losing 4-0, 5-0, 6-0 and getting a tonking. It can't be that bad. So that's just these are things that, look, you're going to have issues and little things you want worked on after a manager's first season. But overall, I think people listening to this can see that we're very, very happy, very, very positive with the direction Manchester United are heading in.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, if we were sitting here in April in his first year and saying there was nothing he needed to work on, then there's something terribly, terribly wrong. I mean, you've touched upon losing with a bit of dignity, and I suppose on a day knowing when, all right, maybe it's time to shore up now, throw in the towel, lick our wounds and just move away, because we've gone to City, we've shipped 6 goals. We've gone to Liverpool, we've shipped 7 goals. We've gone to Arsenal, conceded a last-minute winner. We've gone to Newcastle the last day, conceded 2 when really and truly we could have conceded 3, 4, or 5, and you wouldn't have batted an eyelid, because Newcastle were good on the day. And it wasn't at Newcastle we're doing anything, tearing up roots and just reinventing the game. Newcastle were good. They did what they needed to do, and we were extremely poor. And ultimately, those little things need to be niggled out. They need to be worked out. There's good responses, but the one thing that we hated speaking about 12 months ago, 2 years ago, was that we hated following a side that was reactionary. And you don't want to be reactionary, and look, there's those little beads. And I think it's another little caveat you have to look at as well. Ten Hag comes under a lot of praise for his decision-making during a game, and how he always knows how to make the correct substitution to impact the game. Well, look, if you really, really wanted to be hard on it, you could point the finger and say, well, should you have to be changing so many games? If you got your tactical set up right in the beginning, then you shouldn't have to be altering it.
Look, no, that's a good point. I think it's a good point, because look how many games this season you could say that in the first half you wouldn't have been happy, and then the second half they come out and they play really well. And that's not just, actually, as a matter of fact, that's not just something you can pin on Erik Ten Hag. It's actually something you can pin on Manchester United post Ferguson. If you remember, under Moyes, we didn't have any really good halves, but Van Gaal at times, or Mourinho even, we could play well in segments of games, 20 minutes or so. and that was it. That was it. Maybe not the case under Van Gaal, but Mourinho and Solskjaer, we could get a good half, but it would never be 90 minutes, never be a case of domination. And there's been little signs of that this season again. So it's maybe not something you can pin on Ten Hag, but it's something that we want addressed in the future, maybe.
Absolutely. One last thing I want to push on, and nice and straightforward, but Thursday evening, quarterfinal leg 1 against Sevilla and Old Trafford, kick off at 8 o'clock. What are you thinking for that particular game? Are you confident?
Yeah, I am confident. I was just on this because before every game United play, I go out of my way to kind of try and find a fan of the opposition to answer some questions in the blog. And I love doing this feature on the blog because I get a different perspective ahead of a game. I was kind of surprised by the pre-match chat I had with a Seville fan before this one, because usually when you speak to fans of Spanish teams, they're very, very respectful of Manchester United and what a big club it is and all that. But that they're feeling we're quite arrogant about this. And I don't think arrogance is the right word, but you look at the form this season in the league, they're in the bottom half of the table. They've had they're on their third manager this season. Things clearly aren't going well for Seville this year, and they need a lot of work in the transfer window. So yeah, I am confident. I probably shouldn't say I think we'll hammer them, but I think we'll have a comfortable win. I think we'll go away and beat them as well.
Well, I'll share your confidence that we'll progress, but I want to put something to you because I'm not sure you're aware of this. I mean, just touching on what you said about their season. Yes, their season has been very erratic, and in European competition, Sevilla are currently 11 games without a win away from home. But there is 2 little Achilles alongside that. They have progressed from 6 of their last 8 knockout games against English opposition. And as well as that, Manchester United are yet to win a game against Sevilla in any European competition. Drawn 1, lost 1 in the Champions League, and lost the Europa League semi-final in 2020.
I'm going to kill that stat straight away, Shaun.
Okay.
Show me United stats against Spanish teams before Ten Hag became manager.
It's a valid point, absolutely. But I think this is where it stems. This is why Sevilla's fans are looking at it and saying that United are being that little bit arrogant or that little bit.
And it's their competition too.
It's their competition, but their manager is currently in Birmingham, so it's that those days are gone, unfortunately. But give me a scoreline. What are you thinking?
First leg, I'm going to say 3-1 United.
3-1 United. Okay, we'll take that. And that would
you, Shaun? You as optimistic?
I think we're going to win. I had 2-0 in my head, so I'm going to stick with 2-0. I think we're going to overcome this little hoodoo that we have against Sevilla, and we're going to do it with a bit of style. I think it's going to be an entertaining game of football on probably a wet and dreary Manchester evening.
Just actually, before we wrap it up, I'm not going to ask you to name out your predicted 11 because we could be here for another 15 minutes to predict it.
Yeah.
What do you expect Ten Hag to line up with up front, given that Rashford's going to be absent? And keeping in mind, I'm predicting 3 goals, you're predicting 2. So we're suggesting that United won't have any problems on the goal scoring front, but I'd back that up by saying Eriksen and Casemiro's balls forward are going to make a big difference to the team.
I reckon I could probably name the 11 now. And I can do it in about 10 seconds. I reckon you're going to see De Gea, Malacia, Varane, Martinez, Wan-Bissaka, Casemiro, Eriksen, Bruno, and then you're going to have Sancho on the left wing, you're going to have Anthony in the right wing, and you'll have Anthony Martial starting up front.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, that'll be the team.
And I think that team will be more than enough to put at least 2 goals past Sevilla.
Martial, first goal against his old team where it didn't quite work out for him. That was one of the things actually the Seville fan picked up on, how Martial was a bit of a disaster. So I really hope Martial has a good night, good first and second leg.
It'll be fantastic for him. As long as he can stay fit, we have a player there for the rest of the season that can truly, truly help us. And fingers crossed, Mr. Rashford is not injured for any sort of a lengthy period whatsoever. Dale, anyone listening to this surely knows where they can find us, but where can everyone find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at @O'DonnellDale. You can follow Stretty News as well at Stretty News. And of course, subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Acast.
Absolutely. And if you want to listen to the ramblings of a very, very old angry Irishman, you can get me at Shaun Connolly 85 on Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you for your ear. It's been splendid, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Up the
You
Reds.
big baby.